All right. So welcome everyone. We'll be getting started in about 2 minutes. And we'll start according to our schedule. We will be starting with Lou with a welcome and an introduction, and then Christy will join us with an introduction to SSPI Canada, and also tell us a little bit about Advantic as the host of the organization and about this event that we're going to have. And then we'll be jumping right into the conversation. So.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the SSPI Canada chapter's third webinar. We welcome our guests from around the world to a discussion that I think you'll find fascinating today. This one is called July Inspirations, this part of our series, and I think you'll see why shortly. These webinars are brought to you by Space and Satellite Professionals International and our Canada chapter, SSPI Canada. The mission of SSPI Canada is to stimulate the growth of the satellite industry in Canada, expand the research, innovation, and development of the industry by attracting world-class talent and promoting the development of satellite industry professionals. Now, to fulfill its mission, SSPI Canada's chapter is linked with its members in various industry bodies, education, and government organizations. If you want more information on SSPI and SSPI Canada or our other 17 chapters, visit sspi.org. Special thanks today to the corporate partners of our organization, Echo Star Hughes, Northrop Grumman, Access Intelligence, the publishers of Via Satellite Magazine, and the law firm of K&L Gates for their support of our programs. SSPI, we're trying to make a better satellite world every single moment of the day. Well, Advantic Wireless is a leading wireless broadband communication solution provider. Advantic is known for giving clients the freedom to achieve reliable connectivity anywhere in the world, very important today, and to accomplish critical missions. For more information on them, you can go to advanticwireless.com. Advantic is also the host of these chapter webinars, and I want to thank them on behalf of SSPI for that. I'm really happy to invite Advantic's Vice President of Business Development, Christy Damien, to talk about and get us going disruptive innovations in our industry that are inspiring startups, academics, and investors in Canada and around the world to think differently about how they can make a better satellite world, but also accomplish a range of missions that relate to communications and connectivity. So Christy, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started. Good morning.
Good morning, Lou, and thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining this event. I'm Christy Damien, Vice President of Advantic Wireless Technologies, Canadian companies based in Montreal. We have been around for about 30 years, for those who do not know us, and mostly focusing on advanced solid-state power systems for microwave frequencies designed to allow transmission of signals over satellites and terrestrial microwave links and so on. I have the privilege since last year to be the president of SSPI Canada chapter, a chapter which was founded by a group of Canadian companies and institutions. We have on the board UHP Networks, a major designer, a very talented group of VSAT systems outside of Montreal also. Kepler Communication, who is one of the leading companies into the new low Earth orbit, or LEO, how we call them, satellite networks. Hunter Communication, TV2Go, and Concordia University. So, as Lou said, our mandate is to bring together professionals from the industry, from the private sector, from academia, from government organizations and funding organizations, and to create this ecosystem of space and satellite, which will foster innovation and allow the industry to grow within Canada and not only, because Canada is an export country. Pretty much everything that we do, it's supposed and is designed to go outside for exports. We are a very large country in territory, but quite small in population. So for many years at Advantech, we have been focusing on delivering higher and higher power at microwave frequencies, going up to 31 gigahertz by using alternative technologies. And these alternative technologies are based on solid state discrete components. We have been slowly growing the amount of power that we can deliver over the satellite, starting with few watts and reaching kilowatts right now. For all that we are concerned on satellite communication, we believe that the limitation always was the amount of power that you have available, or EIRP, how it was called. And that's the gain of the antenna plus the power of the amplifier system. Because if you want to transmit higher and higher data rates, you either need more bandwidth or you have to use higher modulation order. And both of them require at the end higher RF power. So in the satellite world, for at least the last 20 years, RF power was the limiting factor which would allow us to reach really high throughputs. But that's changing right now because years and years of development, and we have been focusing on many technologies, including gallium nitride, allowed us to deploy systems like a few years ago, 2 kilowatts in 14 gigahertz, which gave us the ability to saturate an entire satellite, all transponders of a certain satellite with a single antenna. And now we are delivering a system much larger in power, like 8 kilowatts and 20 kilowatts for deep space communication and for all kinds of application. So we truly believe that we are actually opening the gate of satellite, the power gates of the satellite communication systems. Power is no longer the limiting factor. But what do we believe is still missing in the link? There are two key elements. Location, the ability to find the location of our users in a let's say, in a GPS denied environment, which will be critical for many applications, including mobility. And data security or cyber security, because once we start pushing a lot of data, interconnecting clouds, doing 5G backhaul, broadcasting of signals over the satellite, we need to make sure that data is secure. So what is it? Disruptive innovation in our way of thinking, it's based on our experience, is something that if you believe you can do it, then everybody around you, or pretty much everybody around you, will tell you it will never work. And then when you come with a solution that actually works, it changes the mindset of the entire industry. And eliminating this power limit over the satellite, I believe, has changed the mindset of a lot of our partners in the industry and in the scientific community. Now, location all over the world, we believe can be easily, or not so easily, but can be implemented using even the LEO satellites in a very low cost, efficient way. And that's a field in which we are working right now. And data security and cyber security is also very important. And that's why we have on this distinguished panel today a very high-level group of experts from the industry, which will talk about the quantum computing in particular and quantum computing applications. We have been involved for, I would like to say also for a couple of years in designing, for example, solid-state radars. Migrating the same technology which we have developed for the satellite to the radar. So designing a totally digital, from the RF point of view, radar with very high power levels, exceeding 20 kilowatts and so on. I believe this is also something on the edge of technology. It's quite disruptive because it's changing a completely new market, which was not a satellite market in the past. We have been developing quite advanced frequency converters that are able to put multiple carriers up in the sky with a key differentiator between them. These carriers are completely synchronous in phase, and they are coherent, and that gives a leading edge in designing GPS-like location service by using LEO satellites. Where technology is coming now, and in our mind, the quantum computing, it's a key element here, is also a key disruptive technology, because we know, for example, today that using entangled photons and using quantum computers, we can design a new range of radars that do not require those kilowatts of power to be transmitted. So this could be a range of optical radars. Optical links are very important as a complementary technology on the satellite, because if we're looking at the LEO satellites today, most of them, or at least the most advanced one, like Telesat, will have optical links between the satellites to be able to coordinate them and to synchronize them and to offer a path for data transmission. So if we believe that everything that we hear is going to happen, including the fact that we will be able to communicate while moving from any point of the world to any other point of the world without reaching the ground. So by going from satellite to satellite in the sky, by a combination of radio and optical links. Again, location is critical in these applications, and cybersecurity is critical. That's where we believe quantum computing is going to be a major value-added element. We know that there are now satellites up in the sky that are using already quantum computing. We have startups in Canada that are working into this field. One of them, it's Kinet, who is now on our panel. We have a group of universities in Canada, Waterloo University, Calgary University, Concordia University, Ottawa University, to name only a few, who are deeply involved in quantum computing research. So with that in mind, I would like to pass the microphone to Lou for him to continue and to start the panel discussion.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Christy. That's really getting us off clearly. And missing links you identified are really the ones that we need to look into, the ability to find location, and certainly cybersecurity, which we'll be talking about today. Before I open up our panel, just give you a sense of our game plan today. We are going to shortly have a discussion with 3 people who are involved in this area, which, as Christy said, is an industry that has emerged. There is activity, there is investment here, and it is underway. It is not just in the academic rooms and minds of the people who are on the front of this trend. So we'll be talking to the panel. We're then going to have a network breakout session, because you're going to be taking in a lot of information. For many of us, it's going to be new and somewhat complex information. And so we'll have a network breakout so that you can talk a little bit more about it and maybe get some clarification from our guests. And then we're going to wrap it up with a premiere video. We have a Better Satellite World video campaign, as many of you know, that has gone around the world. very entertaining, but it shows what satellites are doing to make the world a better place. So we're going to have our Canadian premiere of one of those as well. And then we'll wrap things up. So that's what we're doing. And again, I want to thank Advantic and the SSPI Canada chapter for allowing us to do this. As Christy mentioned, 5 years ago this summer, China launched the world's first satellite dedicated to the testing of the fundamentals of quantum communication in space. It was, I believe, a $100 US mission, and it was called Quantum Experiments at Space Scale, QUESS was the acronym. It was also named Misius after the ancient Chinese philosopher. That satellite is demonstrating the feasibility of quantum communication between Earth and space, and is testing something phenomenal known as quantum entanglement over unprecedented distances. I have no idea what that is, and I couldn't explain it to you very coherently, but we've got a couple of people who can. But as I said, this is hitting now the commercial market. Our key project, for example, in May, a British quantum technology encryption startup raised $400 million in the space industry's latest SPAC deal, supporting the launch and construction of 2 of these satellites in 2023. Now, their ability to raise the money was to protect against growing hacking threats, because the announcement came as America's FBI was investigating a ransomware attack that many of you remember closed the US pipeline, which impacted significant portions of gasoline and jet fuel to the east coast of our country. And it highlighted a need to bolster cyber defenses. And quantum came into the discussion once again. So quantum, it's a remarkable phenomenon of our universe. Quantum entanglement is, as I said, according to our guests, independent of relativity and distance. And as the kids would say, what? That's way out there, but it's subatomic, and we're going to try to understand it today. I was also told by an investment banker who's a colleague of mine that quantum will blow through an encryption scheme based on cryptocurrency very easily. So there's a lot on our plate today, a lot to talk about, some fascinating topics, and so let's get at it. Well, we've invited some people today who we think will really help us get going. One of them is an entrepreneurial startup company called KeyNet, and it is represented by Jennifer Elliott. Jennifer is the head of business development and a co-founder of KeyNet. She is one of the founders, as I said, of that startup, and their proposition is to develop a quantum technology to secure satellites against cyber attack. And she'll tell us a little bit more about that as we get into the discussion. We've also invited Dr. Susheel Misra with us. He's a professor of physics at Concordia. Dr. Misra has been a full professor of physics since 1977, and this year completed 54 years at his position full-time as a faculty member there at Concordia. So we're very excited to have him with us. On the theoretical side, he works in the areas of computational physics involving quantum physics with extensive international collaborations, and has recently written a paper or a chapter on that subject, which we'll be making available to you. And finally, we'll go out west here in Canada to talk to Professor Daniel Oblock. He's the assistant professor at the University of Calgary and the co-founder of Quantized Technologies, Inc. He, as I say, is an assistant professor at the University of Calgary, and his research group, the Quantum Cloud Lab, tackles experimental aspects of quantum networks and the technologies such as quantum key distribution, which is one of the propositions that KeyNet is putting out into the commercial market, quantum satellite ground stations, quantum memory, quantum wavelength transduction, and biophoton emission. He talks about the feasibility of the quantum network globally, which again would be very significant in terms of this concept of the quantum internet. Again, it's a lot to take in, and I'm just going to be here like you asking questions. So first of all, I'd like to welcome our 3 guests. Welcome, Jennifer. Welcome.
Thank you.
And of course, welcome to my 2 professor colleagues here.
Hi, how are you?
All right, gentlemen. Daniel, I'm going to start with you. You look the most eager right now, so I'm going to pick on you, as you would probably say to your students. Let's get to the nuts and bolts of this. First of
Right.
all, what is quantum? Can you give us, for the lay people and the students and the companies out there that are watching, a definition that we can work with today?
Well, so quantum is centered on the theory of quantum mechanics, which predominantly describes how the world works when you're dealing with atoms or things that are really, really small. It basically is counterintuitive in the sense that things are no more continuous. You can't have any energy that you want. You will have discrete packets of energy, for example. And so in the context of quantum information, we talk about the use of quantum systems to perform information theoretical tasks, so IT tasks. In communication, for example, we would use single photons, which are the sort of basic fundamental packets of energy of light, to encode either bits of some kind, so zeros or ones. Or you could talk about computers, quantum computing, which is a different aspect of quantum technologies, where you use spins or other things that are uniquely quantum, again, packets or discrete energy or states of a quantum system for information theoretical purposes.
Very good. And again, what makes this different is that two things can be relating to each other without any apparent direct connection. Is that?
Well, there are two things, sort of key aspects of quantum mechanics that are not possible in classical mechanics. One is superposition and one is entanglement. So in superposition, it means that, a bit in classical computer can be either 0 or 1. You have to decide which one you send or which one you're computing on. But in quantum mechanics, the space is larger, and you can have superpositions of zeros and ones. So you can have a 0 and a 1, or some weighted average of a 0 and a 1, and you can use that to either send information or do quantum computing. At the same time, you can also have entanglement, which means that two qubits or two quantum bits are somehow connected, or two quantum systems in general are connected and form part of the same system. So these two bits or these two systems are part of the same global system, and it doesn't matter how far apart they are. So it's not limited by distance. And that means that if you're measuring a common property of one of the systems, you can infer the property of the other system, again, no matter how far away it is. And that makes it a bit of a spooky action at a distance, which is the phrase that Einstein used and called it.
Right. The spooky action. Dr. Misra, first of all, I want to know what has intrigued you and pulled you closer to the computational physics that involve quantum physics. But as a practical matter, why is this important in terms of communications? What is going to be the relevant aspect of this in your view, even though Einstein just defined it as spooky? Why is it going to be less spooky as the commercial markets perhaps get into it, and what intrigues you about it?
There are several aspects of quantum physics which are very different from what happens in what we call classical physics, and the phenomena such as quantum entanglement. This is entirely in the domain of quantum mechanics, of which there is no counterpart in classical physics. And as Daniel mentioned, that quantum mechanically we can create superposed states. So the machines or the system becomes very powerful. Instead of having 2, 0, or 1, you can have 2 to the power n bits available, and you can encode much more information in those 0, 1, 0, 0, etc., those bits that you're going to produce. And the quantum entangled states, they are independent of the distance. You have to produce these quantum mechanically entangled states. So what happens if A and B are entangled, then if you go to A and ask a question of what would be the property at B, and A has no prior communication with B, but A and B are in quantum mechanically entangled state, then whatever answer that A gives, you can go and ask B, and the same answer you will get because they are in quantum mechanically entangled state. So you have to create those states, and once you produce those states, then you can separate A and B by enormous distances, because the entanglement is independent of distance. So you can maintain that, number one. And number two is that these hackers who have some knowledge, but they do not have such knowledge in depth to understand how quantum entanglement or how the qubits work, to decode them. So the cybersecurity is much more enhanced, and which is an important aspect of telecommunication.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
these quantum phenomena are really something unique, and they are not understood by an average hacker.
Yeah, and that's a great setup, because we're going to get into that later. But it sounds almost like a husband and a wife that have been married for 50 years. They know each other's thoughts, and even when they're separated, they can sort of finish each other's sentences. If I'm trying to understand that for myself. Now, Jennifer, your company has decided that there's a commercial proposition here. You refer to it as quantum key communications. What is it about what the two professors have said as the wonderful setup here that allowed you and your fellow founders to say, we think we've got something here to develop a role for quantum in the area of at least secure communications to begin?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say is just to kind of backtrack a little bit. When we talk about cybersecurity related to quantum computing, one of the things that quantum computers, can and will do is kind of break our current encryption. And so that's a problem that they're presenting in the future. One of the issues with that now is somebody could download data that's encrypted, wait, and then break it in the future. So if you have data that is valuable in the future, that's a problem. So that's kind of a problem that has been set up by quantum computers. Now we're talking here about cybersecurity and quantum communications. And so quantum communications is a different kind of technology using some of the same principles that presents a solution to the problem. And so I think, we had a couple of things happening. We have quantum computers advancing, becoming commercialized. And so then we also have the need for this answer to that threat becoming commercialized. So that in this case is quantum key distribution, which is, what we're talking about. And one of, this has been around since the 80s, right? And so it's recently-ish come out of the lab and become commercially viable. So people can really build systems. So that's a big part of, why we're seeing a use for it now and why we're seeing a market for it now. It's, A, there's a need due to this threat, and B, we can actually build real systems that really work, that we can really sell. And then I guess the other kind of part of this is just related to cybersecurity in general. As was mentioned, there is an increasing threat from cybersecurity, and people talk about future warfare will be related to information and security, and threats to commercial, threats to governments, all that kind of stuff. So having a really unique cybersecurity product with the properties that quantum key distribution has is really valuable. So it's, you know, as Dr. Misra said, it's got the feature that if you have an eavesdropper trying to interrupt your exchange of encryption keys, you fundamentally know about it due to quantum mechanics. And you can't say that about other ways that encryption keys are exchanged.
Right.
So it's a few factors that all emerged kind of together that has made it, you know, commercially viable and of interest to us.
Yes, and so that's where you saw the opportunity, the obvious one, because of the capability of it. Tell us a little bit about the company in terms of where you are right now, and then also, if you would, because our audience is primarily space and satellite professionals and students and so forth, the importance of satellites in this notion of quantum key distribution.
Yeah, I guess what I might do is actually give you a really brief background on quantum key distribution that we haven't talked about before. So quantum key distribution is the exchange of keys by individual bits. You can do that on the ground through fiber optic cables, but there's a limitation there, and that limitation is distance. You know, when you're dealing with individual photons, there's losses in those fibers, and so you can't really go that far. So you have to have nodes. So, you know, you could go like 100, 200 kilometers, at which point you'd have to have a node that you'd secure. So it's not really feasible. You can't also cross continents. And that's where satellites come in. So satellite, you can do a key exchange from the ground to a satellite, exchange, you know, keys using quantum key distribution and carry that wherever you want in the world, and, you know, exchange a key with another ground station. And then, you know, you can basically have the satellite distribute keys in that way. So that's why satellites are really critical for this global quantum key distribution architecture. So that's the background. Can
I just ask you a question, just because I know we've got some teleport operators out there, and of course Advantic works with teleports. Are the keys uplinked traditionally as they would at a teleport? Is there an antenna system that?
So usually it's most people are using a downlink architecture. But yeah, so you'd have like an optical sender on the satellite, and you'd have an optical telescope receiver with some quantum backend on the ground.
Okay. So there is some new, obviously, equipment that's going to have to be designed or has been designed to get this done.
Yeah, I mean, so people are building optical communications links. And so, you know, there would be a lot of crossover there, but you would need a special quantum backend to detect the individual photons.
Got it. And just in terms of KeyNet, where are you guys right now in terms of your development and market entry?
Yeah, so I described to you previously how satellites could distribute keys around the Earth to be used by people on the ground. KeyNet is actually using this technology to do something different. And we're going after a really specific use case. So we have said, you know what, one issue with you know, satellite cybersecurity is it's hard to get encryption keys up to satellites. So to have, you know, shared encryption keys between the ground and a satellite. So one way to do this that's commonly used is you preload keys. So you have shared keys on the ground station and on the satellite. There are issues with this, you know, something could happen on the ground station and they're breached. Alternatively, you could use algorithm-based key distribution, but that is sensitive to attack by quantum computers. So, you know, if you're thinking of having like a future-proof security architecture, there's problems there. So this is a new way to get keys to satellites. So we basically, you know, have a module that you could put on a satellite if you're building a satellite, and then you can send keys up to your satellite and use that to encrypt, you know, your command and control communications and also your data communications. And I'm sure this group can agree that satellite cybersecurity is an increasing issue, an increasingly high value target for hackers. You know, if you could take out a constellation, that would be devastating, or if you could steal high value data, that would be devastating. So that's kind of where the value lies.
Yeah. And you would, you know, to just to pick up on that, you would certainly upset a lot of business models from Earth observation satellites in the military. I mean, you could blind an army. I mean, there are a lot of things that you could do if you could get at those satellites because of the increasing importance. And as we were talking about earlier, with new low Earth orbit fleets, you could cut off communications to entire parts of nations, power systems. So if you've got a solution to that, you're probably going to have a job for a few years, Jennifer.
Yeah, we hope so. We hope so.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to you on that. But
Yeah.
Professor Oblak, you know, Jennifer's referring to obviously some of the new equipment that's going to be required. You know, when you listen to people talk about this, you know, Vice Magazine did a report on quantum a while ago, quantum computing. They were talking about the end of silicon, that this would replace silicon because we've kind of gotten to the point where, you know, silicon can't be enhanced any further, that it's too slow, and you hear a lot of the sort of the Achilles heels of it. But in order to have a truly global quantum computing network and to, you know, enable our satellites and things to function on this platform, I mean, what needs to happen first? Because it seems like we're developing a whole new communications infrastructure for this if we want to go this way.
Right. Well, so, I mean, yes, the end of silicon, right?
Yeah.
Both yes and no, because some quantum computing platforms actually are involved using silicon, but in a very different way, interestingly enough. But, you know, I think, first of all, let's just make sure that we have the distinction clear, at least something that in academia we are quite careful to distinguish. And a lot of the big programs that deal with quantum technologies have boxes made already. And those are quantum computing, quantum communication, and quantum sensing. So those are sort of like three boxes that we put quantum technologies into. And so here we're sort of talking a little bit back and forth about the quantum computing and the quantum communication application. And so when we're talking about the end of silicon, we're talking about quantum computing. And this is related to what Dr. Misra was talking about, that, you know, when we are able to have superpositions of quantum bits, then a quantum computer is working with 2 to the power of n being the number of qubits or the number of processors, and instead of just n processors. So it becomes a very large number. If you have 100 qubits in a processor that can interact with each other, you're already talking about something like, you know, the number of particles in the universe. You know, so it's a huge number. Since it's an exponential. So in that sense, you know, there's this potential for quantum computers to address problems that are not tractable with classical computers at all. You're just impossible. You would need, you know, again, a computer the size of the universe to do it. And that is why you have companies all the way from IBM, you know, Google, Honeywell, lots of and startups doing quantum computing. So one of the things that a quantum computer can do, as Jennifer was saying, is that it can crack open the encryption keys or encryption mechanisms that we currently use. So if somebody comes up with a quantum computer, you know, in 6 months, we can say goodbye to the currently used encryption methods, and, you know, we'd have to use, I don't know, carrier pigeons again for a while until we come up with something new. So that's why we're preparing, and a lot of companies are also involved in quantum communication, in the sense that this is a way to secure our future communication against such quantum computers. Now, what is a quantum network then? And what is quantum communication? Because one thing is to secure against quantum computers that can attack encryption keys. And that is the most straightforward application right now, because it doesn't fundamentally require entanglement. And entanglement, as we said, is a very interesting feature of quantum physics, but it's also really, really fragile. And even though, as Dr. Misra said, it's not related to distance, I mean, it doesn't really in principle matter whether particles, one particle is here and the other is on the moon. It is so sensitive that it's hard to maintain over a long period of time. So if you take the two particles and entangle them and then put them far away, it's obviously going to take some time to put them far apart from each other. And by that time, entanglement is going to be long gone, at least with the methods that we can maintain entanglement at the moment. So, so some sense, in practical sense, there is a limitation to the distance right now, just because of the way we do it.
Mm-hmm.
But so quantum key distribution doesn't in principle require that, and that's why it's an easier application first to get into doing. But in the long run, we can also look at what are the advantages of quantum computers beyond just having individual units located at IBM and Google headquarters. There could be a quantum internet where you have quantum computers located at different locations, users which can connect to these quantum computers, sharing quantum resources. And you could imagine that, if you want to have a very complicated computation done and you need 2 quantum computers for that, well, you need some kind of a link between them. And in that case, for that kind of fully enabled quantum internet, you need to have the ability to distribute entangled states. And then for that, there's lots of technological hurdles, which I'm happy to discuss, obviously, but I also don't want to take all the time.
No, that's great, actually. And of course, what I'm sifting through with your brilliant explanation is the ability to use quantum to really solve very big problems that we can't currently solve. So the end of silicon, but for a purpose, right? To be able to solve problems we can't solve. I mean, a computer the size of the universe, I think you said, you couldn't even get that in Canada. And Canada's a pretty big place. So we've got to think differently, certainly about that. Well, thank you for that. Dr. Misra, I'm going to move to what I opened with, which is the Chinese initiative 5 years ago this August to launch their quantum satellite. When your colleague, Dr. Oblak, talked about attack of encryption keys and things of that nature, obviously here in the West, when China makes a move like that, those thoughts come to our mind. But I want to ask you as a scientist, as someone who is in the world of physics, what is your observation of the Chinese pioneering launch?
Well, from the fundamental point of view, I think it's an excellent initiative. And it started with the collaboration of Austria and China, and it involves Europe, Italy, and France, and also North America ultimately. So I think it's a great initiative. It had to start. And as we have understood already, that quantum entanglement is a very esoteric concept for people to understand. And at one time, I knew what entanglement was, but when I wrote my chapter on quantum computers, I realized that we needed quantum entanglement to build quantum computers. So it's not a figment of imagination. It's something real, and which is needed, and scientists are now using it. And the Chinese, when they took the initiative to launch the satellite to test the entanglement, that was a great triumph of these esoteric concepts. Even Einstein, he talked about entanglement as something, theory of hidden variables, like you go, A and B have no communication, but if they are in quantum mechanically entangled state, whatever you ask A independently and ask B, and they have had no prior communication, you'll get the same answer. And this was verified by this launch of the satellite, and then they could verify that indeed entanglement existed. But as I mentioned, it's a very esoteric concept which has been put on firm footing now. And even people like Einstein, there is a famous EPR paper, Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, where Einstein did not believe in quantum mechanics. And he said that there is something, as I mentioned, the theory of hidden variables. But these variables are not really hidden. I mean, you can you can verify them, you can test the existence, and in fact, you can build quantum computers on that. As Daniel mentioned, what are the potentials of using quantum computers and quantum technology and quantum network? It's enormous, and this is just opens up a big horizon of what can be done. I'm just a fundamental researcher at this point. I'm not involved, like unlike Daniel or Jennifer, into real projects where these concepts are utilized, but I can envision that there's an enormous amount of future there, and the future world in I don't know how many years from now, but there are problems, the problems of what Daniel mentioned of decoherence, because the quantum mechanically entangled state, they have to be preserved. And because of what we call in physics decoherence, and decoherence happens to diffuse the coherent state. And so we have to work on having to put it down and in mundane terms, we have to have long memories, like the systems will retain their memories for a long time. So and there is a lot of research being done on the systems being developed, especially in NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance, where the relaxation times are much longer than electron paramagnetic resonance, which is my field. But there are, I mean, we discovered the vaccine for COVID-19 a year ago. People did not believe. I believe that the scientists will come up with a vaccine,
Right.
and we did come up. And I believe that the quantum technology will be the technology of the future. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I think that's very well said. I don't think we have any reason to doubt that. And Jennifer, before we go to networking break here, I think Dr. Misra leads us nicely into, again, the commercial aspect of this for companies. He referred to going from esoteric to a firmer footing. Well, that, again, triggers some conceptual thinking, and then conceptual thinking leading to commercial development. So as you look at China or other models for the satellite industry, the British SPAC that I referred to earlier, how are you thinking about the commercial development as we continue to be on firmer footing with something that is defined as decoherent?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you like, as Dr. Misra mentioned, you're seeing it go from this idea of people saying, oh, I don't know, and now they're seeing it really work. They're seeing real hardware. So I think the Chinese satellite was very affirming and probably drove global interest. And like any new technology, like anything that's quite different, it takes a while for people to be interested, for people to start believing in the potential of it. And that's why you're just seeing things kick off right now. Like even this SPAC that you mentioned will drive global interest in QKD. People will say, hey, this is a real thing. We could really use this.
Mm-hmm.
So that will develop, customer belief and the market belief in this as something that they could use. Also, this is something that they can use to assure that they have a competitive edge. They're not going to have cybersecurity issues. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the natural growth of something like this.
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to get your take on your observation at Keynet on the Chinese project. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I mean, I think it's just what I said before, just that it was affirming, that this could be done.
Okay.
I think it was exciting for a lot of people in the QKD community saying, wow, they did it. We can do it too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And they got there first. And, it's like Dr. Misra said, we didn't think we could develop a vaccine in a year, but as Paul Simon wrote, this is the age of miracle and wonder. And you guys are part of it. Well, listen, we took in a lot of information, and I really want to thank our guests for participating and speaking to this so clearly. I know it was at a very high level, but I even got it. So if a dummy can learn quantum, anybody can. What we're going to do now is answer some of your questions in our networking breakout rooms. So we'll be taking you out to the networking breakout rooms. You can ask questions, and then we'll come back and we'll close by watching our Better Satellite World Canadian Premier Video. So Tamara, if you want to take us out, we'll meet each other
Absolutely.
in the networking rooms. Thank you,
All
everyone.
right. Thank you all. We're going to,
Thank
I'm
you.
going to open up all the rooms right now. It's only 2 breakout rooms, and so feel free to ask questions there and turn on your cameras to meet and greet each other. And then we'll come back and we'll enjoy a video together.
Tamara, it's about 10 minutes. We'll be networking.
It will be about 10 minutes exactly.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right. And if anybody's having difficulty joining their room, please let me know. Daniel, I'm switching you to room 1 because somehow, inexplicably, all of the panelists went to room 2. So
Yeah, I
I'm
saw
going to move you.
notice. That's fine. That's good.
Okay. Okay. Mark, are you having difficulty switching into a room? Also Prateep and Rabi, Trevor, Bahi, and Wilkin? You can unmute yourself and let me know if you need help getting into a room. Okay. Wilkin, are you okay? Mark, are you able to join the room, or are you wanting to join the room? Also Vahi and Rabi. And welcome back, everyone. Lou, you're on mute.
Oh, I have to take myself off mute. I'm kind of lazy, so thank you. Well, thanks everybody. My breakout room was certainly fascinating, and I really appreciate everybody and for their questions, and Dr. Misra and Jennifer Elliott for participating in mine. And I'm sure we had the same experience in the other room. Jennifer has to leave us, but I wanted to thank her for making the time, and keep your eye on Keynet. We'll try to bring them back at another SSPI Canada chapter event.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, Jennifer. Thanks again. We're not sure exactly, I don't think, when the next SSPI Canada chapter date is, but our friends at the chapter will certainly let us know. What I do want to do is to make sure that all of you know, especially those of you who run companies or have mentors in your academic circles, that SSPI runs a 20 under 35 and Mentor of the Year program every year. So if you have a superstar in your organization that is under 35 years of age, you can go to the SSPI website, and as part of our 20 under 35 cohort, nominate them for one of our Promise Awards. It's a great way to give them visibility, to give the organization visibility, and to recognize a global star in our industry. And if you go and look at our list of the 20 and under 35 and Promise Award recipients, you'll see people who years ago were named and are now running companies and doing great things in our industry. So we really encourage you to do that. It's really a good way to identify talent in the industry. I also encourage you to listen to our podcast every Monday, The Better Satellite World. I'm the host of that podcast, and you can listen to that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can see it at the SSPI website as well. I want to give a shout out to our membership director, Tamara Bond-Williams. She has served double duty today. She's producing this event for us. Thanks again, Tamara, for making this thing possible. There she is. And if you have any questions about SSPI, she's the one to ask. Tamara runs our membership program, and we have over 3,000 members. Membership is free to students, $100 a year US to people, and we've been around for over 3 decades. So I think you'll enjoy the experience. And similarly, if you're in Canada, we encourage you to reach out to our friends at Advantic. Christy Damien is the president of the SSPI Canada chapter, and they'd be glad to welcome you to participate in that chapter as well. Christy, before I run the video, I'm going to turn it over to you to say goodbye. We'll run the video, and then we'll go back to work.
Well, thank you, Lou. So on behalf of SSPI Canada, I would like to thank the entire panel. I think we had an amazing and extremely interesting conversation, a lot of great ideas and concepts. I would like also to take the opportunity to extend the invitation to all the members of Canadian universities, industries, students to join us. You do not need to be a member to participate in these events, but if you are a member, you certainly have some benefits. It's a great way to discuss new things, innovation, and to build this ecosystem, which we really need and can foster in Canada. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Christy. And again, Christy, thanks Advantic for hosting this event and making it happen. Okay, so as we close, I want to run a video from our latest campaign to promote the industry. This is the Canadian premiere, and my name is Lou Zaccarella, and I just want to remind you that you have the ability to make it a better satellite world. So let's go out and do that.
The vast forests of the tropics are givers of life. 80% of the Earth's land animals and plants live there, and more than 250 million of the world's poorest people make their livings from the forest. Forests matter. The trees of the Amazon produce 1/5 of the oxygen we breathe. All the world's forests keep more than 200 billion tons of carbon out of the atmosphere. But every year, fire, bulldozers, and lumber crews clear millions of hectares of forests, an area bigger than New Zealand. In just the last 40 years, the world has lost a forest area equal in size to all of Europe. Stopping deforestation is hard. The poor people most affected by it have little power to change things. Much of it breaks national laws, but overstretched governments struggle to stop it. One nation, however, stands out. The government of Norway is the first to fund programs that help tropical nations rein in deforestation. A grant to Brazil in 2008 helped preserve enough forest to keep 3 billion tons of carbon out of the air. A 2010 agreement with Indonesia offered incentive payments for reducing emissions, and that nation's carbon output dropped by half in just a few years. In 2020, Norway took another step. It announced a first-of-its-kind public-private partnership with Planet, Airbus and KSAT. Together, they would provide access to detailed satellite imagery covering 64 countries, all for free. Planet operates a vast fleet of small satellites called doves. They take pictures of all the Earth's landmass every day. Those pictures are detailed enough to reveal individual trees. Airbus is adding an archive of images captured by its Spot satellites since 2002. These allow today's forests to be compared to those from years ago. The Norwegian company KSAT is pulling together all this data and providing technical support to users who can view and download the files from Global Forest Watch or Planet. With daily updates from space, the images offer the first chance to see deforestation while it is happening. Logging and land clearing operations deep in the forest can no longer hide. Governments and international organizations can identify illegal actors and pressure them to change. And all this value comes free of charge because the Norwegian government is paying for the service. For the founders of Planet, this effort is the realization of a dream. When CEO Will Marshall, Chief Strategy Officer Robbie Schingler, and Chris Boshausen left NASA to found the company, their goal was to provide actionable data on the whole planet at the speed of change. This lets governments, businesses, and researchers make smarter, more informed decisions to better protect our world's ecosystems. For Norway, the images show its forest funding at work. As the government's Minister of Climate and Environment told the BBC, we decided to foot the bill for the world. So, the next time you take a deep breath, thank Norway and the images and technology that come from companies like Planet, Airbus, and KSAT. Together, they are helping keep the life-giving forests of the world alive. Space and satellite, the world's invisible, indispensable technologies. Brought to you by Space and Satellite Professionals International.
Are you struggling